Good day, I'm Katie Peer for PMV In Depth. Thank you for joining us for the second part of our interview with Mr. William Lyon Mackenzie. When we left off, Mr. Mackenzie, you had gained enormous strides for reform in Upper Canada. But a lot happened while you were abroad. You were ejected from the Legislative Assembly again. The Lieutenant Governor refused to call a by-election to replace your seat. And the Legislative Council refused to act on the orders of Lord Goderich. When Goderich found out about it, he fired the Solicitor General and the Attorney General of Upper Canada. But meanwhile, back in England, Lord Goderich himself was replaced by a new colonial secretary, who advised the Lieutenant Governor to disregard all of Goderich's instructions. How did it feel, Mr. Mackenzie, when you returned to Upper Canada to discover everything you had gained had been reversed?
I lost faith in the British government. The people had been heard. We were going to get the same reforms that the people in Britain had. And it was all ripped away. I removed the name colonial from my paper.
But you were still a man of great influence in the colony. When Toronto became a city, you were appointed its first mayor. And that council was stacked with reformers. You were given a great gift, Mr. Mackenzie. The opportunity to put through the reforms in Toronto that you had been fighting for in the province. And yet, you chose to spend the time campaigning for a seat in the Legislative Assembly. I wonder, Mr. Mackenzie, did you know what to do with authority when you had it? You got your seat in the Legislative Assembly, and you were successful in bringing in a majority of reformers. But you stopped publishing your paper, and you left the management of the city to the next mayor. Tell us, how did the appointment of Sir Francis Bondhead as Lieutenant Governor in 1836 change things yet again?
I learned a hard lesson in the value of the written word. Bondhead was probably it was the worst appointment yet. He actually interfered in the elections and manipulated a Conservative majority. I lost my seat in the mix, and he made sure of that with the Orangemen he sent out to intimidate those men that were going to vote for me. Oh, the brawls and the fighting. I was subject to those beatings too. So I began a new paper, the Constitution.
And with this change and that paper, you set a course for rebellion.
I did not set a course for rebellion, my dear lady. I was discouraged, I'll grant you that. But I still wanted constitutional change.
Mr. Mackenzie, is it not true that you promoted both in your paper? Your editorials seem to flip-flop between armed uprising and constitutional reform.
I wasn't telling people what to do. I was writing what people wanted. They needed to decide how they wanted change to happen.
Mr. Mackenzie, you were drafting a constitution. You were collecting signatures on a declaration of reform throughout the province. You were actively forming committees of vigilance and political unions throughout the countryside. I don't think you can say that you weren't telling people what to do.
Well, I never once used the term rebellion in those meetings. It was a demonstration of force and unity that I was after. And if Some of the men came armed. It was probably to protect themselves from the hooligans and orangemen hoods that would start fights and then go running back off to Bald Head.
Mr. Mackenzie, let's move on to the events that led to the armed uprising of 1837. By the fall, you were certain of support from key political reformers who still had power in the province. David Gibson, a member of the Legislative Assembly, Dr. Rolfe, a trusted advisor to Bondhead, and Dr. Morrison, the Mayor of Toronto. You were also assured of support from men in surrounding communities who had high standing. Those men agreed to recruit their friends and neighbors to join your committees of vigilance and political unions. And they agreed to become your captains. You held a meeting with those leaders in late November, and you set a date for rebellion, December 7th. Peter Matthews of Pickering was among those leaders. Dr. Rolfe at the time suggested it was important for you to have a man of military experience to lead the rebellion. You agreed, and you wrote to Captain Van Egmond, a man who had led soldiers in the War of 1812, and he agreed to join you. Mr. Mackenzie, did you or did you not publish a formal call to arms on November 27th?
I did. Recent events made it clear there was little choice. So, yes, I wrote a plea to Canadians. I distributed it outside the city, and yes, I told them to ready their rifles and make short work of it. And yes, I said that a connection with England would involve us in all her wars undertaken for her own advantage and never ours. And yes, I wrote that with our governors, we would have bribery at elections, villainy, corruption, and perpetual discord in every township. And yes, I wrote that independence would give us the means of enjoying many blessings.
I understand that Dr. Rolfe sent you a warning through David Gibson. He discovered that the Lieutenant Governor was preparing to arrest you and your captains. Gibson forwarded it to Samuel Lount, and Lount assembled 300 men and began his march to Montgomery's Tavern on December 4th. Tell us, what happened next?
I didn't get Rolfe's message until the night of December 3rd, when I arrived at Gibson's house. I was so angry. We weren't ready yet. But there were all those men already gathering at Montgomery's. There were no provisions for the men, no food, no military man to lead them. I set men at roadblocks around the tavern to make sure that Bondhead wasn't sending troops. I decided to wait until the next day. The next day was no better. Rolfe met me at Gibson's house, and he told us that a rebellion in Lower Canada had been put down and that we should call off ours. But it was too late. The men were gathering at Montgomery's. All those men attracted the attention of Captain Moody, who lived close by. Well, he was on his way to tell Bondhead. And we stopped him, and things got a little bit heated, and Moody was shot and killed. I took Anthony Anderson and a couple of men to scout down Yonge Street when we came upon a couple of men from the city. Well, we took them prisoner. One of them had a gun, and he killed Anderson. There was nothing left to do but advance. Samuel Lount and I divided the men in half and led them down Yonge Street. We Rolfe, he was sent from Bondhead with a flag of truce. I said I would disperse the men if I could have it in writing from Bondhead that a convention of the people would be called to begin the next government reform.
By then, the lieutenant governor wanted no more of negotiation.
Yes, Rolfe returned to say that troops were on their way. He advised me to proceed as planned. Van Egmond had not arrived, so Blount and I began to lead the men down Yonge Street. I called for one house to be set afire. I was about to call for another one to be set on fire, but Blount would not hear of it. Well, soon we met Sheriff Jarvis and his militiamen. A few shots were fired and our men scattered back to Montgomery's. The next day, the 6th, Peter Matthews arrived from Pickering with 60 more men to fortify our side. I intercepted the mail going west to see if there was any news of what Bondhead had in plan, but there was nothing of any use. Van Egmond arrived and advised us to call off, but he too realized it was far too late. We were in far too deep. We might as well just carry on. On December 7th, Peter Matthews was assigned a group of men and ordered to create a diversion on the Don Bridge and to intercept the Eastern Mail and make sure that Bondhead couldn't send royal troops to attack us. Van Egmond led the rest of the men towards the city. By this time, more troops met us in greater numbers, and shots fired, and another one of our lads was killed, and the men scattered to safety, and Montgomery's was burned to the ground. I was able to escape by the generosity and kindness of my fellow man, and was able to get across the border. So did Rolfe and Gibson. Others, however, were not so fortunate. Samuel Lount and Peter Matthews took the noose in my place. But it was Rolfe and I that they really won.
Thank you, Mr. Mackenzie. They say timing is everything, and for a while, timing seemed to be on Mackenzie's side. When they first met Jarvis, there were few men, and the city was not strongly fortified. If the rebels had stood their ground, the city was likely theirs. But what they needed was a military leader, and that wasn't Mackenzie. I'm Katie Peer for PMV In Depth. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you tune in again for more interviews about Pickering and the Rebellion of 1837.